Okay, hello everyone. In this lecture, I will be talking about the usability testing metrics that are very important for your usability test, right? So when you're doing running, conducting a usability test, it is important to decide for the researchers and also like designers what to measure, in the usability test, right? So in what aspects you're interested in, what kind of metrics, what kind of measurement that are important for your studies objectives, right? So you're running kind of like a usability test to be able to understand kind of and the usability and also user experience of a mobile apps, right? So in this regard, what aspects you're interested in. For example, like you want to know about the performance of your participants in terms of how quickly they can complete the task, right? Or how many errors they make, right? And how they navigate through your mobile apps, right? So there are many metrics that you might be interested in terms of a usability test, right? So in this lecture, I will be talking about the very common usability metrics that are like very important and also that are useful for your usability test and of course for your usability report, right? And these kind of like metrics are very important for your interface design, UX design, to improve, right? So, first of all, we will look into the task success, right? Okay, task success, like task completion. So these, you know, aspects are very important in any usability test. They are crucial for like any products, right? Any interface system, right? For example, they might be using a website in terms of e-commerce, for example, right? So to be able to purchase an item or like a product from the e-commerce system, it is important to go through the entire user journey, right? From starting from the like browsing your website, logging in, finding or looking for a product, an item, add the item into the shopping cart, and also they check out, make payment, and they obtain, they got the receipt, right? So this entire customer journey basically has so many steps and so many tasks, right? So the task completion, right? Individual tasks like subtask, they are important to be completed. And at the same time, like the entire customer journey is very important to complete, right? So which is why the task success is like very very important. It can be a small task, right, depending on what to measure, right? For example, you want to test only the login and the registration. So for example, the registration form, like user needs to fill in the the information, the data, customer data, and they just click on the register, right? Then we can consider their task is completed, right? Or maybe the bigger task, it may contain several steps. As I mentioned, it can be job application, it can be purchasing a product, and so and so. But anyway, the task success is like very fundamental and the crucial for any usability test, right? So theoretically, task success in usability testing, it basically means that we measure a user's like ability, right, to accomplish, to complete specific goals the goals always like contains, the task, right? To be able to achieve our goals, we need to execute the task, right? Using your product, using your software, using your device, and so on, right? It is a very common one, right? So it evaluates user whether they achieve their objectives, using your products, your website, your mobile apps, and so on. Very important step here is the criteria, right? So what are the criteria that you define? You must like predefine all these criteria for accurate assessment, right? How will you define this success, right? For example, as I mentioned, right, e-commerce website. So user will start logging in, browsing the products, all the way to checking out payment, right? So how will you assess or like do assessment in terms of like task completion, right? Okay, step number one, okay, they complete step number two, right? Step number three, and so on. So you need to have a benchmark, you need to have criteria that must be predefined, right? So that you will be able to uh measure or assess the accuracy of customers, users, task success, right? So this is very important. And if you have predefined criteria, it will be consistent all the way, in the entire usability test, because you may have multiple participants, you may have multiple researchers, so that like having criteria is like very good, because like everyone can follow and execute, using these criteria, right? All right. So in some cases, just a verbal feedback during the usability testing, the communication can be sometimes unclear, misleading, and so on. In that kind of situation, you may have structure tools such as like questionnaire right after the like session, or maybe you may have usability software that will capture all the tasks and the results, you know then by the user. So which is why like the task success is like very important. So when you're measuring a task success, the very first one, which is the easiest one, it will be like binary success. Like, okay, binary success is like very simple, it's a very straightforward, it's very fundamental, and of course it is useful, right? So we just want to measure, we just want to um observe and also make a decision whether a task by the user was completed or not, right? So it's kind of like binary, either one or zero. One is like success, and zero is like, failure, right? So it's very clear. So you just observe like user using or like testing on a task, executing a task, then you observe and then you evaluate, you do the assessment whether they achieve or not, right? A task is completed or not. So for example, like the criteria must be for registration form, right? So user fill in the registration form and just all the required fees, and also like just click enter, and like user will get the success message, right? Okay, you have successfully registered, and all the data must be like kept or like stored in the database. And again, like next time, all right, after registration, user will be able to log into the system by using the information that he or she has just registered, right? So this is kind of like you can set a criteria like either success or like failure, which is kind of like pretty like common and straightforward and easy to use. When you're deciding like binary success, like it can be task specific. Okay, it will be like task number one, number two, login registration, search products, make payment, and so on, right? You can measure it based on the specific task, or maybe you can measure based on the participants, right? So when you're testing the usability when you're running the usability test in the lab, right? Maybe you may have like 20%, sorry, 20 participants. So in that kind of situation, you might want to like know each and every participant's performance. So in that kind of situation, binary success is like pretty important. So as you can see it here, like binary success, like okay, so this is kind of like participant specific, and this is like task specific, right? So just very clear, like we don't have any like the benchmark, just like binary measurement, right? Either one or zero, then you accumulated and average the total number of like participants who kind of like achieve the task, right? Then this is the average for like participants. Okay, so this is kind of like a participant number one, what is the success rate, right? Considering all the given task here. So this is kind of like task specific. So for this specific task, for example, login and the registration, how many participants um, have successfully accomplished, right? So this is how we can uh, calculate, and also like using visualize using the table form. And you can also use like that kind of bar chart, like including all tasks and the number of like participants, percent of like participants who achieve in the task in the like usability section, right? So this is kind of like you conduct a usability test, and like you combine all the like the metrics and the like results, then you calculate it, then you transform it into like the visualization. And the error bar here, right? The error bar is very important. This is kind of like the understanding of like the error that user the across the users, like across the participants, like what is the error rate that we should consider, right? Or in other words, like you can standard error rates, or like you can calculate the standard the deviation, right? So these are all part of our usability test. So the next one is like task failure. So when you're going to like measure the like task success, like how will you define the failure, right? So as I mentioned, right, the binary success is very clear, either one or zero, right? You already know. But in some cases, we might want to like measure, right? We might want to understand, like how much a user like completed in a task, even though they fail in the test, right? So for example, like as I mentioned, we have like one bigger task, like the purchase a product, but it basically has like subtasks, like 5 subtasks, for example, right? So until what task like user completed, where were these stuck, right? So these are like important information we might want to know, right? So how many participants completed until what task? Okay, for example, they completed registration, login and registration, search the like products, add to the shopping cart, they check out, then they make payment, right? So almost everyone, 90% of like total participants, like they reach until checkout and then payment, but majority fill in payment, right? So these information are very helpful for the designers, for the developers to be able to understand, because like we may want to put more emphasis on this particular area, and what kind of problems, what kind of like um you know the wrong information or wrong labeling, or like what kind of like wrong navigation we may have, right? So sometimes like it is very important to like understand like the task failure. So task failure, you can define many of types of failures. For example, like giving up, like as total like user kind of like they choose not to continue because like they think it's too hard or like too complex or they cannot do it, right? So it may happen like in like very complex like the transaction or like very complex like the user task, right? So for example, like what do you call that, the enterprise systems, right? So normally such kind of like enterprise systems are very ERP systems are very large, very complex, like user actually don't users like they don't know what to do, they don't know what to continue, so they absolutely give up, right? On the next one is like moderator intervention. So sometimes users they cannot continue, but the moderators like intervene and also like help the users like to continue, right? um or maybe like it can be ended by the moderator due to the lack of progress or like frustration. So user seems like very frustrated, user seems like lost, so moderator either can help them or like maybe they will stop the test, right? Depending on your how you design what the protocol is in your test. Time overrun, like you one of your criteria maybe like you have like predefined time, like okay, within 3 minutes user should complete the task, right? If it's like exceeding the time, then it will time overrun. Mistakes, like sometimes like users like they have done like mistakes, like but like they don't know, like they did a mistake. So in that kind of situation, like moderator can like remind them, or like maybe like we will consider this one. Okay, user basically completed the task, but user didn't realize that they make a mistake, right? For example, like very simple example, you have to submit your assignment. So we have like different sections to submit your assignment, but because of the poor label and the instruction, user like submitted the assignment to the wrong placed. So which is why even though the task is like consider user thinks the task is completed, but actually not, which can be considered failure. Okay, when you're talking about the binary success, like it is very important to keep users data like anonymous. So this is not only for the success like in any usability test, make sure you never like collect the personal particulars, right? So for example, like their name, like date of birth, and so on. Right? Okay, so there are like some important information that we need, such as like gender, sexual orientation, or maybe like their occupation, maybe their salary range, right? In that kind of situation, you should have given like the option users whether they want to answer it or not. Like in any usability testing, we will never force our users like what to do and like how to do, right? So they may have their own freedom, and like we should respect their like the personal data and the privacy. So the remember the users like the consent is very important. And of course, in any usability test that we have to make sure this is like voluntary, and like they can drop the like session whenever they think is like they don't want to continue, they can stop anytime, right? Okay, going back to the binary success, like it can be vary from like the person's like experience. So the success can be like vary from like one user to another, depending on like how frequently they use their product experience, their expertise, their gender, their like maybe age, and so on. For example, like you're testing a software, right? So all your participants, they have like experiences in like IT or like technologies and stuff like that. Of course, like there will be like learning effect, right? So they will transfer their past knowledge into the into the new system. So which is why your sampling, your profiling is very important. So when you are testing the software or that system, your sampling is like very important. That it should cover a wider range of participants from like different age groups, like expertise, their experiences, education level, and so on, right? Depending on the scope of your system, your objective, and the nature of your software, right? So they are pretty important. Okay, so when you look at this visualization, so we have the experiment, all right, a comparison something like A/B testing here. So the blue one is original, the red one is like redesigned, right? So you kind of compare and contrast. Maybe um you can do like the experiment, one group will be using the old system, the other group will be using or testing the new system, right? Or maybe either one, the alternative is like one group will be randomly assigned to like two systems, then they will randomly test, then you will collect the success rate, and you will be able to the showcase, or the show the results here, right? So as we can clearly see it, so for the very first variant, it is kind of like pretty bad, right? We have only majority is kind of like their success rate is like pretty low, right? um Whereas like after your design improvements, you say like majority is here, and the success rate is increased. So, level of success, like as I mentioned before, right? If you don't want to do the binary success, like the level of success is like very, very important. So, evaluating success requires a nuanced approach beyond binary outcomes. Recognizing the value of partial completions provides very useful, very critical insight. So, as I mentioned before, right? How much they completed in the task, even though they failed, right? So the partial completion is very important. The near success and the task like shortcomings are very, very important, because we may want to look into a particular point in your system, or a particular action, or a particular page, right, or particular state. They are pretty important to understand. And because designer, like developer, they will look into it and decide whether what they should do, and of course what what to improve in the test, right, in the design, of course. Okay, so when you're defining the different level of success, like complete, which is very simple, but even for the complete success, we have to consider with assistant how many times a moderators have to to kind of interact and provide the guidance or instructions and so on, or maybe without, right? So this is all a part of your usability protocol, right? Well, what is your strategy? So whether moderator will be intervening, interrupting, helping users or not. Or partial success you can also define with or without assistant. And the last one is like a complete failure. So there is no assistant. So determining assistant given to participants during your usability test when users are executing the task can be quite challenging, right? So assistant can include like what kind of assistant? Okay, you will not provide any assistant. It can be a part of your protocol, or maybe you can moderators can suggest participants to look at the documentation, the help, and so on, or maybe repeat the like instructions again. All these things are a part of your protocol, but like we have to predefine, we have to be consistent across the usability test. For example, like participant number one, you help the participant, right? But participant number two, you don't give any assistance at all, so which is inconsistent, right? So when you're designing your protocol, so how will you define the success, and like what kind of protocol that you have. Okay, scoring method is kind of like pretty simple. Like we can you can decide based on like it's kind of like not the randomly, but like your team, your designer team, your programmer, all you have to like do is like to do the discussion and also like define the scoring methods. How will you define rating number one to like number four? No problem to failure, right? So how well you define it is kind of like pretty important here, right? And also you can always review like well, what is the industry standard, and also what is the like what is mentioned in the literature, right? So scoring method can be adapted from the existing literature review, or like maybe you can adapt this that from our industry standard, right? So as you can see it here, right, so it's pretty a good simple and very informative, like the visualization. So it contains like in your usability test, it contains like multiple tasks here, and so we have like three groups, like the total failure, it has some problems, no problem, right? So this is more informative, like rather than like black or white binary success, right? One or zero. So looking in like how many users basically has like no problem, right? um there's some problem failure, so it basically tells you, okay, login has like quite issue, and such we still have like quite a number of issue in the search. And like checkout, obviously it's the worst, right? Fine book is pretty okay, but like almost no or like very little number of like users you know um fail. But like there are like a majority, or maybe like quite number of significant number of participants, they still have like problems. So the question is how we are going to um use it, or sorry, fix it, improve it. Okay, so the next one online one, the metrics that is very important in usability tests is called like the time. Okay, time is very important, right? um in usability test, you want your users to like succeed 100%. Time, generally speaking, you want your users to accomplish their task as quickly as possible, right? So this is generally true, but it is not the case always, because it depends on the like the nature of the system, the nature of the software, and so on. For example, like if you talk about the, what do you call that, um the Netflix, right? So very sure, like the Netflix, they may not want you to you know to complete your task as quickly as possible. It makes sense, right? Because the longer you spend on their website, you know the better it will be for the like the system, the product, the company, right? The same thing for like the e-learning platforms, for example, Coursera, right? So the longer you stay, the better it will be for both parties, like students and the Coursera, right? But in some cases, like purchase, booking flight, booking hotel, they need a quicker time, right? So they want you to complete as quickly as possible, right? For e-commerce, of course, like they might want you to spend longer time on the um on the on the website, because they want you to explore more and more, introduce more and more products, right? All depending on the the nature of the system, the product. So anyway, the time or task is like very important. It relates to the efficiency, how efficient your system is. Like why faster often means better usability, but in some cases it is not true, right? So time on task, like we measure the interval, right, from the beginning of the task until user completed, right, from start to finish, which is very important that we need to measure it. Like, okay, so just time is, you know, on kind of like user start executing the task, then you have to count, you have to measure, you have to record the time, right? So this is pretty important here. So what how you can do it, you can measure it based on the manual measurement. Basically it will be stopwatch, the mobile phone or like recorder or whatever, right? But of course, like if you want to use the usability testing software, definitely they can measure all these like interval and stuff like that, right? So one thing that we need to remember is accurate timing is like very important, and like dual recording can minimize errors. It basically means like you can use the software and you can manually record it as well, right? Using watching your watch, seeing your watch, stopwatch, using your stopwatch, and so on, right? So but remember, like engaging tasks can increase like side time. This is kind of like quite a good thing, right? For example, like game systems, the more you spend on the game system, the better it will become, right? So this is what the companies, right? What they want you to do. So as I mentioned, there are many like softwares like Moray or like Observer XT. They are pretty good one. You can record the user's timing. Start timing one a task is like read a lot, right? Because like it's very important. One to start and one to stop. So stopping requires clear indicators, like you can design it based on what you want to achieve in your task. So this is pretty simple but like quite effective one. So you will have many participants, like 1 to 20, which is kind of like a good number in a usability test. So task number 1 to 5, we have record in seconds. So this is our individual participant specific. This is like task specific one, right? Then you can calculate the total mean score, median, the confidence interval, and the error rate, and so standard error and so on, right? So not necessarily you have to include all, based on what the results that you're looking for, you may calculate it, right? All these stuff, like you don't need a special software, you can achieve like by using the spreadsheet and stuff like that. Okay, so how you're going to analyze and present your task. So you may have your benchmark, right? The maximum is like 1 minute, like okay, register log in, right? So how many participants like completed logging in less than 1 minute? So you can use this like bar chart or like just to visualize and present your the the results. In usability tests, the error basically refer to like a user make mistakes, right? Resulting from because of for various reasons, usability issues, user experience, including like unclear labels, like round navigation, confusing interface, misleading, and kind of like the affordance, right? The round affordance and so on, right? So identifying and understanding these errors is like very, very important, as they can lead to inefficiency, increase cost, and task failure, right? Okay, and also the errors are related to task success, right? Okay, and also of course you need to look into what exactly user like make mistake, or for example, okay, like they key in the wrong information, they select the wrong navigation, they click on the wrong button, all right, or maybe they cannot read the label properly or like clearly. So these are all inefficiency that can impact on the user's experience, right? So we need to clearly know what errors they make, and the common errors are very important, right? Common errors. So the common, if you understand the common errors in your usability test, so it is indicating or like pointing out that your system has this particular point, this particular UX design, UI design, it has issues, right? So very simply, measuring errors requires that understanding correct, incorrect actions. So it can be single error, it can be multiple errors, right? Single error is basically, yeah, maybe you don't have user like doesn't have many options, they have only one action or only one key in or whatever, right? So the possibility is of making error is like the single error they might make. For example, like clicking on the shopping cart button, or maybe upload the assignment, stuff like that. But there are like cases like multiple errors, for example, form filling, right? So there are many chances that they might make uh errors, right? Multiple errors, right? So how you're going to do is kind of like a single error is very simple. We can record the number of errors, um or like for each task, of course. But single error, we can either like put no error, or like yes, we have error, right? But multiple errors, what we need to do is kind of like depending on the like how many numbers how many errors they make, the number of errors between 0 to like the total error that you can define. For example, like the um checkout page, right? So how many errors that user can make, from 0 error to like maybe 5 errors. So you have to define, right? So um you know depending on the page, right? So you have to clearly set all these like benchmark and the criteria before you conduct your usability test, right? um how you can go into like how you can kind of like tabulate, how are you going to tabulate the errors? That, of course, we can do the observation, video recording, the automated software. All these are very important in your usability test. For example, user is using or like executing your task, like we observe them, or maybe we will record the entire section. We can do both, right? Manually recording, observing, and like we will review the video recording later on, right? And of course, the next one is automated tools are precise, and like it will tell you what exactly user make mistake, right? So how you're going to present, analyze, and like present errors? Single errors are pretty straightforward, but multiple errors, we need to use the error rate formula that will tell you the average of the errors done by the participants. I will talk more details later on, right? So these are tasks where only one error occur, like one, either 1 or 0, right? So user make a typo, which is error. User doesn't make, like, which is like 0, no error, right? Which is kind of like single error opportunity, right? But there are like multiple errors, like which is very possible. For example, user are requested to fill out a form with like 10 fields. For example, like the job application, right? So each field presents like an opportunity for an error. So each field that user can make error. For example, require fees, for example, right? Does the user know it is a require or like a compulsory, the mandatory one, right? So we have to clearly label it. So if one user makes errors in 3 out of 10 phase, and another user can make like 5 out of 10, depending on the like how many participants, how many are the probability of the possibility of making errors that you have to define it, and based on that we can calculate the total error rates using a formula. Okay, I will give you like one example here. So in this given scenario, imagine like a user is testing the usability of an online registration form for a conference, right? They register. So what he or she has to do, so he or she has to enter the personal details and like choose the workshop and submit the payment details. Like these are three major actions, right? They are consequently sorry, they are kind of like they have to be executed in order, right? Sequentially. Okay, but when you break down the main task, you have like subtasks. So personal details will have like three possibility of like making errors. Choose workshop like two, payment details nine, right? So considering all these, all like the possibility is what is an 6, 7, 8, right? So here are eight possibilities. Like when you talk about like you have like 5 users in your usability test, and like user A to like E. So the number of errors they make can be varied, like from 3, 2, so there is no error, and so on. Then how you're going to calculate it, right? Um, so here is like actually okay, here is like 9, but it doesn't matter because like the 9 basically means kind of like okay, there is a possibility of like a user making like 9 potential errors, not necessarily to relate to the previous example. You can define based on like any possible errors, you know depending on what system, what page, what task user is executing, right? So this is the error rate formula, very simple. A number of like errors user make and total possible errors. For example, like user make 3 errors, but the total possible error is like 9. Then like you put all these values into the like into the formula, and like multiply by like 100, so that you will be able to know the the error rate, right? So it is clearly tell you like what is the like percentage user A achieve, user B achieve, and so on. Then you can calculate the average like error rate as well. Like so the procedure is you need to determine total error opportunities. If you have 10 fields, you have like 10 errors, of course, right? So it depends on like the system that you choose. So count the number of errors made. Count basically means that you observe, you record, and you count, right? Then you calculate the error rate for each users. As I mentioned, right, the total number of errors and like error opportunities, the total number of error opportunities, and like times like 100, then you will be able to do it. Then this is important. The average, very simple. So you have like 2 users, user A like 30% error rates, user B 50%. If you have like 2 users divided by 2, then it will be the total error average will be 40% for the entire usability test, right? And of course you can also like or like showcase like this is condition number 1, the total number of like participants making an error for the condition number 1, right? Or like task number 1, something like this, right? So the control can be like your maybe the kind of like the your control setting is basically there is no or changes. It can be like a particular design, right? But if you want to change design and test with other variants, then it can be like the experimental setting or condition here. Okay, so the next one here is like efficiency. Efficiency is like very important. Like, how efficient, um, you know, how efficiently user can use your system, right? So efficiency can consider like time and effort, the combination of time, like the effort. Effort is kind of like, how much work they can complete, they can like they have to do and they achieve, right? So what we can do is of course like we can collect and measure the efficiency, basically the number of like pages they visit, the number of clicks, how many keystrokes, how many button presses. So they are like all a part of efficiency. So we need to clearly define the start and the end of each action, each task. Then we have to remember, how much time they take, how many clicks they have, and so on, right? How much time they spend on a particular page, where they start. So these are all a part of like efficiency, right? So if you remember the um the GOMS method that I taught in the class, which is kind of like, one methodology that you can use to measure the efficiency, right? So using like two variants or two approaches, one is like, your main approach, the other one is your alternative, right? So using the GOMS operators, GOMS theory, then how quickly user can complete the task, how efficiently they complete the task. So the GOMS method is very useful here. Okay, so collecting and the measuring efficiency, one possibility is like lostness, right? So how much loss user, how long user lost in using your system? Loss basically means like user cannot find any right path to the success of their objectives, their goals, right? They were lost, during the task, right? So it is important to calculate the lostness. So the lostness, the formula is given here. So n equal to like right here, like n equal to the total number of like unique pages. It must be unique, right? So to be able to accomplish one task, how many pages, what pages user has to go through. For example, 5, this is a unit, right? But the S basically means like the total number of page visit, including revisit to the same page, right? Okay, for example, from homepage to the checkout, right? It basically has like 4 pages, unique pages. But S here is kind of like, okay, user kind of like from homepage to the like, browse to the like shopping cart, then user comes back to the like homepage again, then we have to count it again, right? So revisits are like very important. R basically means like minimum number of pages, right? So minimum number of pages is kind of like to be able to achieve this task or this goal, how many pages minimum, it must be minimum pages user has to go through. For example, like user only needs to go through 3 pages. So this is the minimum number, right? So the lostness like measure how long a user gets when navigating a website using a mobile. So if you see like 2 diagrams here, okay, this is the shortest one, the minimum, right? 1, 2, 3, then user accomplished. But this is kind of like user lost, right? You can see so many the routes here. User get lost and like homepage, category A, campbacks, blah blah blah, and so on. He or she cannot find the like the category that they want, right? So a total of like 9 pages, 9 revisits, right? 9 visits. So this is kind of like user lost clearly. This is like it clearly tells you user can easily like navigate, go through the entire website, right? So how we are going to do, we are going to like, like calculate it. 6, it is a unique pages that user visited, right? So this is kind of like, the total number of like page visits, including the redundancy, right? So R is basically the best route, right? Which is very important. So you kind of like put all the various like values into the like formula, then you will be able to calculate 0.6, right? So um the value which is closer to 1 than 0, indicating a higher degree of inefficiency. So the higher, the worst, right? So the more lost user has, right? So it's kind of like above average, right? So it means to a certain extent user get lost, right? So the closer to the 0, it basically means user um is fine, right? They can kind of like find the important information. Okay, so the lostness formula is very great one, and the other one is like sometimes that you might want to combine the time and the success, right? So by combine this combination can represent the total efficiency of a particular website, right? So efficiency, if you can see it here, right? So you have already calculated the completion rate previously, success, the time, minutes, so you can like translate into like from seconds to the minutes. Then efficiency is basically divide this one divided by this and times 100, then you will be able to obtain the efficiency percentage. So it will tell you another metrics that how efficient your system is, right? By covering the total completion rate and the total time that users have taken, and stuff like that. And you can play around with like various visualization here. Okay, so the next one is learnability. Learnability is basically like important as well, like especially how easily user can learn to accomplish like basic tasks for the first time, right? So this is for the like new users, like new products, like the learnability is very important. So what are the things that you might consider, like time to complete, the number of errors, user satisfaction? You can combine all these like metrics into one, and like how quickly you can learn, such as like system usability skill that I taught you before. So they already cover that, the metrics for the learnability in the questionnaire, right? So learnability is another important metrics that you might want to do, right? Okay, so these are like all basic and important usability metrics that you might want to cover in your in your usability test. Okay, the other like metrics like self-reported metrics, which are very common in the usability test, such as kind of like you might want to use like 5-point Likert scale from like strongly disagree, strongly agree, and you might implement some questions related to the usability test. Then you have to ask these Likert scale, which is very common. And like in some cases, semantic differential scales are pretty popular as well. Like you give like one side of the like the strand of like is a weakest, this is the like strongest. So you give a range, user can basically like select the number, right? So you have to translate, yeah, okay, 0 to 7, or like 1 to 5, something like this. You can translate to numbers, and like you can visualize it. Self-reported data are basically depending on your usability protocol, maybe right after your session, or maybe each and every task, right? So one thing is like let your users use the system, the entire system, and like collect the like self-reported data. The other one is basically after every individual task, you collect the value. So how you're going to analyze the like rating scale? Pretty simple. You can use like from zero to 5, for example. This is kind of like a little bit weird here, but you can be more kind of adjust in the like spreadsheet depending on the what tool that you're using. So that kind of like graphs are like telling you what you can do. So ease of use is kind of like one of the important aspect in usability metrics. For example, if you're using SUS, like is already covered here, okay, then you can combine all the different aspects of usability metrics, put it into like radar chart. So it basically tell you the like overall situation of your um the totality of the usability in your system. And there are many other tools like product reaction cards. So you can choose like the related emotions and response reaction, then let users like choose, right? And there are many like models that you can adopt, like technology acceptance model, net promoter scale, and so on. Net promoter score is basically how likely user wants to recommend your system to others, right? So net promoter score is like one possibility. But these are like common usability measurements that you can consider, but not necessarily you have to use, or depending on like how much time you have, like your research objectives and what you want to achieve, and like the nature of your usability test. For example, if you do early usability test like with before completing the final usability sorry, the final product, so you might want to use like a single questionnaire, something like this, or maybe just interview, just observation, depending on the like how what you want to achieve. All right, that's all for like for this lecture, and I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.